All right, the Philadelphia Eagles season is over. Season did not go, I think, as most people expected it to go. It had ups that were really high and downs that were really low. Um, I'm gonna go week by week, kind of getting a feel for the team and what happened along the way for the Eagles to lose six out of their last seven games, starting off 10-1. Um, it was not a pretty year. This was one of the seasons that I was this was one of the years that I expected more of the team, but usually when I expect more of an Eagles team, they end up doing less, and when I expect something less of an Eagles team, they end up doing more. For example, when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I predicted them to go 9-7-ish. I didn't expect that team to be where it was. After the Super Bowl, I was glad the Eagles even made the Super Bowl. And throughout the offseason, there was clearly some free agents. There wasn't a lot of free agents from last year's team, but there was key pieces that you knew going into the year you had to address them in free agency in the draft. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I knew that was going to be a big one. I wanted to retain Bradbury and Gardner-Johnson. I knew Hargrave wasn't going to be a big deal. We already were deep at defensive tackle, and I didn't expect the Eagles to draft Jalen Carter. So Hargrave honestly wasn't a big deal. Even looking back on it, would I want Hargrave on this team? I liked Hargrave, yeah, but would he make this team a whole lot better? Probably not. Gardner Johnson, though, yeah, that was a big loss. But at the end of the day, we got Reed Blankenship last year, and he was one of the best players this year. Um, Blankenship was awesome. I mean, he was having a Pro Bowl level season. Um, I and then Eagles traded for Kevin Byard. He wasn't terrible this year, but he wasn't good. Um, and that's what you'll see most of the players. I mean, you look at the numbers for most of the guys across the league. There's a lot of players that weren't terrible, but they weren't great. They weren't playing to the level of what was expected of them. But we'll go week by week. I'm just rambling now. Week one against the Patriots, you kind of expected the game to be a bigger deficit between the Eagles score and the Patriots score. I mean, even looking back on it, why did this game end up as close as it? Why did this game end up as close as it was? Weather was a factor. Weather was a factor for a lot of games this year for the Eagles. It wasn't snow, it wasn't cold, it was rain most of the time, especially early on in the year. Um, yeah, week one, I remember watching the game and thinking, the offense is kind of stale. Um, I thought, okay, maybe it's the weather. I gave the benefit of the doubt to Brian Johnson. I thought the defense played well and the offense just didn't execute. That was kind of the issues I had for week one. Jalen Carter looked awesome. Uh, Darius Slay had that pick six, which was probably the highlight of the year, outside of the Bills game. And yeah, I mean, you expected the team to be better than what happened in that game. And I think from then on, it's most Eagles fans were, including myself, were thinking, okay, this team is going to get better. This is just the start of the year, some kicking off some rust. This is going to get better from here. And I mean, I wouldn't say it got better, but I wouldn't say it got worse. That was pretty much the point of emphasis on the entire season. The Eagles could have been so much better, and they could have been so much worse with how the game plan was being ran. The Vikings game, the Eagles came out to a lead. They were up 27-7 in the third quarter. And they just started losing that. They just started losing momentum. This was the best rushing performance of the entire season from the Eagles, but they weren't running the ball when it mattered. And I mean, I'm DeAndre Swift could have been a lot better this year, and it's not on Swift, it's on the play calling, it's on the usage of him. There was a lot of Gainwell runs this year, and I expected Rashad Penny to get those carries. I expected DeAndre Swift to get those carries. Um, and in this game, I mean, it was a great game from DeAndre Swift because the emphasis on the Patriots game was there wasn't enough running, and it allowed the Patriots to stay in the game. There wasn't enough running with DeAndre Swift. And it's not one of those things where, oh, he's a new guy, we're gonna let the veterans get the bulk of the carries because you had the entire offseason, you had the preseason to figure that out. So this was the okay, let's give it to DeAndre Swift game. And I mean, even to this point, the offense is still kind of lackluster. You could expect more from the passing game. You're playing the Vikings. There's no reason that the playmakers like AJ Brown, like Devonta Smith, like Dallas Goedert, and Jalen Hurts should be playing like they are. To this point in the season, I mean, we're in week 2. Jake Elliott is pretty much the MVP of the team to this point, and I'll talk about Jake Elliott. Jake Elliott, I mean, maybe he was the Eagles MVP this season. It's stupid to even think about. But when the Eagles needed just points, Jake Elliott was there to get them. You look at this Vikings game and he kicks a 61-yard field goal. Jake Elliott had such a great year this year. Um, I don't know. It was a rough start to where this team could be so much better. Um, I mean, you can talk about that for other games too. And then there's the Buccaneers game, the first time. The first time, I would say that was the best performance of the entire team. The defense played well, the offense played well. DeAndre Swift was running the ball. I mean, the Eagles were running the ball all over the place. I was thinking to myself, all right, this is what we needed. This is the game that's going to kick things off for this Eagle season. Then you allow the Commanders the following week to score a touchdown with no time left to forcing him to overtime. Then Jake Elliott shows up and helps us again. Um, then the Rams game, this I thought this was possibly going to be a loss. The Rams were sneaky good this year. At times they looked really good, and at times they looked mediocre. The Rams game went well. I mean, to this point, the Eagles are 5-0. A lot of close games though. I mean, they easily could have been 0-5 during the stretch, 4-1, 3-2. I mean, whatever record. They just so happen to be 5-0. They're winning close games. It's nice to have a team that's winning close games, but eventually you got to start running over people and dominating people. And I just wasn't seeing that. And that's something I expected of this team, especially with what happened last year. Uh, it was to this point in the season, week 5 against the Rams, that I said to myself, Brian Johnson is not doing well. He's not calling good enough plays. He's forcing Jalen Hurts to be running the ball way too much, not running the ball with the running backs enough, not getting the ball in the playmakers' hands, not allowing, not there wasn't routes developing on time. The defense, the defense wasn't terrible. It's just they weren't getting enough pressure. They were always a split second this entire season. And when Desai was the defensive coordinator and calling defense plays, they were always a split second away from getting a sack. And I'm thinking, all right, you know what? Eagles are just getting unlucky. Last year they got so many sacks. This year, just half a second slower. Or the offense that they're playing against is half a second quicker. Secondary was not playing well. I couldn't trust Bradbury. Bradbury was kind of iffy for me. Some people were saying, "Oh, he'll be fine," and other people were saying, "Oh, he's a bust. Should have just re-signed. Should have just re-signed Chauncey Gardner-Johnson." And I get that. Um, I mean, Bradbury. I expected a lot more of. Clearly, he was a system corner last year. Um, or maybe he isn't a system corner and the system that he's in right now is the worst possible system for him and thus making him worse. I don't know. Um, the Jets game, you know, it was to this point, I say it every year. I don't like to go undefeated. I don't want to head into the playoffs undefeated. And at this point, the Eagles were 5-0, and I'm thinking a lot of these are close games. It's very possible that the Eagles could lose to the Jets. And, they did. It was a bad game, but reminded me so much of the Commanders game from last year. Things just don't go your way. And I don't look at this game as an indicator of anything going forward. The same issues on offense and defense were happening. It's just ball bounced the wrong way. Jets won the game. It happens. It happens to everyone. That's why I don't like going into the playoffs undefeated. I like to go 16-1 or before when there was 16 game schedule 15-1 because that loss forces the team and forces each individual player, each individual coach to think we could be so much better and we need to fix our issues. These are our issues and we need to fix them by doing this, this, and this. And you know what? That was the Jets game. So I'm okay with that. The Dolphins game, this is where the I started to not believe in the defense and thought Desai is not doing well. Um, Secondary did not look good. Understandable. You are playing the Miami Dolphins, who at this point were a couple weeks removed from dropping 70 on the Broncos. And Tyreek Hill all year long when he was healthy was one of the best players in football. I mean, there's nobody on the Eagles that can cover Tyreek one-on-one. I mean, Slay, you know what? I have a lot of respect for a lot of those guys. I like Darius Slay, James Bradbury. I have my issues with him. Reed Blankenship, I like watching him. I like watching a lot of these guys. Eli Ricks, Keely Ringo, Bradley Roby was okay at times, but nobody can cover Tyreek Hill. You needed to play a zone coverage against them where you're essentially doubling Tyreek Hill. Have a safety up top, which wasn't happening. You were allowing Tyreek to get one-on-one with a corner or a safety, and they were just beating them. And it led to other guys on the Miami offense getting open underneath because you're focusing way too much attention at times in the secondary and leaving guys underneath open. That's where the linebackers were an issue this year, a large issue. Then there was the second Commanders game where Jalen Hurts had an amazing game. But you allowed the Commanders to get into that game late. I didn't like that. Um, that's where I thought maybe the offense is clicking. We're going to get involved in a rhythm. And we need to see this offense going forward, especially with the weeks to come. Now, before the season, I saw this following stretch as, you know what? If we can go 500 during this stretch, I'll be happy. At this point in the year, 7-1, You're going to host the Cowboys, have a bye week, travel to Kansas City to play the Chiefs, host the Buffalo Bills, host the San Francisco 49ers, travel to play the Cowboys again, travel to play the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. If you can go 3-4 during that stretch, I'd be happy with that. I mean, at this point in the year, I thought, okay, we're probably 6-2 ish. That's what I expected going into the season, looking at the schedule. I thought maybe the Dolphins would give us some issues, maybe the Rams would have issues, maybe the Vikings would have some issues with us. And the Jets, at the time going into the year, I thought they had Aaron Rodgers. I thought maybe the Jets would get their first win against the Eagles. Well, they did, but without Aaron Rodgers. Anyways, this was the stretch that I thought, okay, I don't care if we win over half those games. If we can just come out healthy, have a playoff berth, have a good rhythm going into the playoffs, I'll be happy. And then to this point, around week 8, I'm thinking, okay, if we can beat the Cowboys and then go into the bye week, I'll be really happy with where the team is at because then we're 8-1 and our next stretch of 5 games, you know what? We could lose all of them and end up going 8-6, then finish the year with the Giants twice and the Cardinals once. I thought maybe we would win all 3 of those last games. So the Eagles beat the Cowboys, very close game, great game, great game by the Cowboys. Cowboys were inches away from making the game even more difficult for the Eagles, but the Eagles took advantage, stopped the Cowboys on some key plays. That's kind of what I get every time the Eagles play the Cowboys with Mike McCarthy as the head coach. So I'm glad they're keeping him. Thank you. Um, so the Eagles are 8-1 going into a bye. I'm thinking, all right, I like where we're at. And I'm trying to tell everyone it doesn't matter what happens. If we can somehow pull away with one win of the next 5, that's okay. That is more than okay. If you go 1-4 during that stretch now, you're 9-5, and you play the Giants, Cardinals, and Giants, which should be a 12-5 season. That's my thought process. If you lose all of those games, you are going into it thinking, all right, we'll be 11-6 going into the playoffs. Well, we did go 11-6, but very different. Not expecting it to be like that. So, Eagles go to Kansas City, beat the Chiefs. Marquez Valdes-Scantling had the drop. We all know that. You can't really put that on the Eagles. Chiefs got to get a better receiver. And I've been saying that about the Chiefs all season, that they need to get a wide receiver in there because their receivers aren't good enough for some of the greatest quarterbacks of all time to even do anything with. With Kadarius Toney and Marquez Valdes-Scantling dropping passes, Travis Kelce is having a terrible year in terms of drops. So Eagles go to Kansas City, beat the Chiefs. I'm thinking, wow, this is awesome. I don't know how the next 4 weeks are going to go, but whatever it is, I'm honestly okay with it. So Eagles host the Bills in what could be the game of the year. I don't know, but I can't vote for this for game of the year because I am an Eagles fan. Just like our Bills administrator, Jason, you've seen all his videos for the entire season. He can't vote for this game for game of the year, but this was an amazing game. Bills played phenomenal. Josh Allen played phenomenal. Jalen Hurts played phenomenal. Jake Elliott had one of the greatest kicks of all time. I mean, some people were talking about the weather and the distance that Jake Elliott had to make to send the game to overtime, unbelievable. And then Jalen Hurts getting the game-winning touchdown. It was a great game. And I'm thinking this is where the Eagles going forward are going to be so much better. And this is where the bad stretch of games comes in. So Eagles are 10-1 to this point. I'm thinking, all right, if we don't really have to win the next three games against the Niners, the Cowboys, and the Seahawks. Play the Giants twice and the Cardinals once. Should win all three of those games. You should win all three of those games. If you are a Super Bowl contender, which the Eagles clearly were, you should win all three of those games against the Giants and Cardinals. And even if you lost to the Niners, the Cowboys, and the Seahawks, you would end up 13-4. And look, 13-4, that would have been a great year. The Eagles would have been in the running for the number one seed. And you lose to the Niners. I expected that to be closer. I thought this is not a good game. I expected more from this team. This stretch was what made me think, okay, Brian Johnson, Sean Desai, something's got to give between those two because we're seeing the same offense we've seen all year long, whether it's the New England Patriots offense, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, the Washington Commanders offense, or the Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, San Francisco 49ers, or Dallas Cowboys offense, or their defenses. And we're seeing the same things no matter what. There's no change. And I didn't have an issue with Nick Sirianni. I thought, okay, this is just the play calling of the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. I never thought about Nick Sirianni's job during this 3-game stretch. And I know people are going to say, oh, Seattle shouldn't be a game you should look at during the stretch. You're going to Seattle. Seattle's always been an issue for every team traveling there because of the sound. We all know that. It doesn't matter who is playing quarterback, doesn't matter who's on that team. Dallas Cowboys game really didn't go well. You expect something happened or nothing happened from the last Cowboys game to this game. There's where the Eagles didn't change. There was nothing that changed in this offense or this defense. And the Cowboys game plan for what happened in the last game. So because they didn't game plan and they just stuck to a script, that led to the Cowboys having an advantage going into this game. So Cowboys go and win. Then Seattle is going into the game. Jalen Hurts was questionable with an injury, and Geno Smith was questionable with an injury. Geno Smith didn't play. Jalen Hurts did, and Drew Lock goes and wins the game. Defense looked terrible in that game, and you know what? Switching to Matt Patricia, I know a lot of people are going to hate that decision. And you know what? From a player's decision, you shouldn't be making the decision to switch your play caller before that game. I mean, you're playing against the Seattle Seahawks. You shouldn't switch at this point. Your stretch of hard games is about to be over. All you have to do is play the Seahawks now. Keep Desai calling plays. But no, Patricia came in. I understand the decision to change the defensive play caller. I don't understand when it happened. This should have happened during the bye week. If you're going to change anything, would have been during the bye. And I'm okay with a fresh face. I know Matt Patricia's track record is terrible, but just a fresh face, something new. And I didn't think it could get worse, and it did get worse. Uh, I mean, there was some defensive linemen that were out there that I'm thinking, why are they getting snaps over Jalen Carter? And it was to this point in the year where Jalen Carter was almost non-existent because of the situations that Patricia was putting him out there. Milton Williams was getting more time. Jordan Davis was getting less time. We saw fourth string defensive tackles, fifth string defensive tackles out there. Nobody was getting pressure. This defense was terrible. It was one of the worst. It was the worst Eagles defense during for the rest of this season after this that I've watched. Now the Eagles are 10-4, and like I said before this stretch of games, I'm okay with this. You're 10-4 and you're about to play the Giants twice and the Cardinals in between. So there's no reason you shouldn't win all those games. And I mean, even if you lose the last game, you rest your starters, right? Go 2-1. You go 2-1, then you're sitting at 12-5, much better spot. Maybe not the number one seed, but you're likely winning the division. But your chances of winning the division are higher. Um, I still don't think that would have made a difference in the division. But you know what? 12-5, I'm okay with it. I'm okay just getting into the playoffs. I'm okay with that. I mean, if you the most I wanted was the number one seed. At this point, probably it wasn't obtainable unless at this point it wasn't really obtainable unless the Eagles won out and the Niners lost the game, I believe. Don't hold me to that. So you go beat the Giants. There's no reason it should have been as close as it was. That was disgusting. Then you host the Cardinals, and that was like a double dosing of the Jets game from earlier this year and the Commanders game from last year. And that was a bad showing. And it was at that point where I'm like, I don't know how far this team can go into the playoffs. Um, they had everything they wanted in their hands and are just letting it go. There's no change. And it was at this point in the year where I'm thinking Nick Sirianni has always been about adapting and willingness to change, right? His first year in the league last year, every single week the Eagles were trying something new depending on the opponent that they were playing. And that if that means we ran the ball 40 times, we passed the ball 50 times. It didn't matter. We were always willing to change with Nick Sirianni as the head coach. And, going into the year after you win a Super Bowl or in the Super Bowl, some players get hot-headed. They think, oh, I can do this again. We can do this again. But the players on the Eagles, nobody really had that mindset of we could do this again. It was the same mindset that this job is not finished. We still need to win these games. We still have one goal in mind. And we still have to play each week one game at a time. And this was the first year where I think Nick Sirianni got hot-headed. And he he wasn't willing to change. He was sticking with this script and thinking that it was going to be easy to go to the Super Bowl. I know he's probably not saying that, but you expected change, and we didn't see that. His only change was when Sean Desai was demoted and Matt Patricia became the defensive play caller. But that wasn't going to solve the offensive issues. The offense had issues. And you know what? There was times where people were saying, "Oh, Brian Johnson's a bad play caller," and people were asking him, "What are you going to do about Brian Johnson?" And he was saying like, "This is my offense." What is that's a bad look to Brian Johnson. If you're Brian Johnson, you're thinking, "What do you mean? This is my offense." What is Brian Johnson's job then? Is he just a vacant spot? Are we supposed to blame you, Nick Sirianni? Should you be fired? And that's where he was lying during press conferences. After the Seahawks game, the play where I believe Nick Sirianni lied about one of the plays between Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown. I believe it led to an interception, and he covered it up saying, "Oh, that was something we worked on," or something like that. I don't remember the whole thing. And AJ Brown came out after and was like, "No, that was just something me and Jalen at in the heat of the moment did, and it just screwed us over." And AJ was applauding Nick Sirianni for defending him. You know what? That's a great job, but like there were already doubts in the coaching staff. You lying straight to the media's face is not helping anyone. You're thus lying to the entire fan base as to what is going on. I don't even nobody knows exactly what is going on now. And how can I trust you? Even I know it's a little thing, it's a very small thing, but it you're supposed to be better than that. You're supposed to just tell the truth, even if it's a very bad truth. Tell the truth. Um, and you know what? It's yeah, you lose to the Cardinals, then you go lose the last game of the year to the Giants at basically the halftime. At halftime, I mean, you pull your starters midway through the second quarter because the Giants are just destroying you. There's no reason that that game should have been that going that way. That was disgusting. And this was the first time going into an Eagles playoff game where I'm like, if we won a game, I'd be happy with that. Uh, then you go lose to the Buccaneers. Defense couldn't do anything. I thought maybe going into the playoffs that, okay, maybe there's some change. The same offense, same defense. All year long, the Brian Johnson Sirianni offense was not running the ball enough, except for like one or two games, and wasn't running the ball enough with the running backs specifically because there was a lot of runs with Jalen Hurts. Hurts, I don't know if maybe there was an injury or not. There was some games later on in the year where Hurts was running very well. And I thought maybe early on in the year he had an injury and he wasn't running well. Later on, he was running well. The Bills game in particular, he was running well. Um, and but this offense had screen passes to tight ends to Julio Jones. I mean, I love the Julio signing. That was great. If in in any other season, I mean, you're 10-1, 9-1, and you got Julio Jones. I mean, I'm thinking, all right, that's a great veteran presence to give the rest of this team, and I love that. Julio wanted to get a ring, and we needed some veteran presence for some of these young guys. I loved it. Kevin Byard trade, I love that trade. That was awesome. It didn't go well, and I really think it had to do with the scheme. I mean, most of the time Byard was playing down low and Reed Blankenship was playing up high. Why? Byard has been one of the best like center field safeties, roaming safeties, free safeties in the last 5 years. And Reed Blankenship, known for his tackling, should be playing down low. But you switched them. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand the philosophy behind that. That was that was not good of whoever was making those decisions on defense. But yeah, that Bucks game, I mean, nobody was tackling. It was one of the worst tackling performances I've seen in a football game. I mean, there was a Raiders beat writer who I saw say that this reminded him of the Raiders defense a couple years ago who led the league in missed tackles. Um, I don't remember who the beat writer was, otherwise I would acknowledge him. Offense was running the same plays, RPO slants, four verticals, screen passes to tight ends and third string receivers, and Jalen Hurts runs. There was just no change. And the Bucks took advantage of that. Um, And I know people will say Baker had a great performance. There was a lot of drops that this game could have been a lot worse. I am shocked with the amount of drops that happened from Mike Evans. Mike Evans could have made the game a lot more far apart in the Bucks' favor if he caught some of those passes. And same goes for a couple other guys. I mean, there was one receiver on the Bucks who's like under 6 feet tall. He's under 180 pounds, and he's just bouncing off linebackers. He's bouncing off guys, and I'm like, what is going on? That was a bad game. And then going to the Shaq Leonard signing. I love the signing. I wanted Shaq Leonard. I thought it would have been a great addition. But you know what, scheme? It really didn't matter who we signed at linebacker. We could have signed Ray Lewis in his prime. I don't think it would have made a difference with this scheme. And yeah, I mean, I don't think he played terrible, but clearly there was some coaching issues on both sides, offense and defense. The day I'm recording this, Brian Johnson got fired this morning. A couple days ago, Sean Desai was let go. Matt Patricia's contract's already up, so it's not like he's getting fired. He's just not being retained. Um, it's not like we were going to retain him anyways. I did think with the lack of change that there's a possibility Nick Sirianni could have been fired. I was looking historically over the last like 3 or 4 times that the Eagles have finished the year 1-6 or worse, and all every time during the last like 3 or 4 times they've been fired. I was thinking, is there a possibility he does get fired? I mean, I like Nick. So before we hired Nick on the Eagles, I thought, I don't know what I'm looking for in a coach. There were so many issues. I mean, the Eagles had just fired Doug Peterson. I didn't know if I wanted an offensive minded coach or a defensive minded coach. So I think finding just someone to reestablish a presence like Nick Sirianni, he's a mental coach. He's there to help you mentally check how you're doing, to be there for you. Similar to what Mike Tomlin does, similar to what the Harbaughs do. Um, and, sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. I'm more of an X's and O's type person. I like to see schemes and stuff. I think at the end of the day, if I was building a team, I'd rather have someone who's specifically trained to help the offense or the defensive side of the ball. I don't think Nick Sirianni technically helps either side. He's just there for them. He's there to support them. Some people want to blame Howie Roseman for some reason. I think Howie approached this year very well. Um, those people want to blame Howie because we didn't re-sign Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, even though you should probably blame his agent. The Eagles offered him a really good contract. His agent said no, thought they could get a better contract elsewhere. They didn't. They ended up getting a 1-year deal with the Lions, and then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson goes and gets hurt. That's that's not on the Eagles. The Eagles did everything they were limited to when trying to re-sign him. And the agent probably should be fired for that. Um, but I mean, I don't know whose dumb decision it was to decline that and think you could get money elsewhere. So I don't know. Then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson had some comments on Eagles fans. I don't know why. There's videos on my phone of him literally dancing, cheering with Eagles fans. There's videos of him in press conferences talking about Philly fans and his love for the city, love for the team, love for the players. And then he goes and just goes back on those comments. I didn't like that. That had a sour taste in my mouth. And I loved watching him in New Orleans. I loved watching him in Philly. Just a very sour taste in my mouth. In terms of not re-signing TJ Edwards and Kaiser White, I wanted to retain one of them because I knew just keeping one of them, you get an old face in there. and then someone to help out Nakobe Dean. Nakobe Dean was injured throughout this year, even when he was playing. I think again the scheme wasn't really helping anyone. Um, I think he was okay. There were some times where I'm like, yeah, this guy's awesome, and then other times where it's like, where is he on the field? I mean, if you told me before the year we would have Nakobe Dean and Shaq Leonard, I'd think, oh yeah, no problem. We don't need TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. I wasn't a huge fan of TJ Edwards. Kaiser White, I thought, this is like an added bonus to the defense. I liked having him at times, but he wasn't really a necessity. As someone like the Cardinals would have used Kaiser White very effectively, and I'm glad that he went somewhere that they could use him. TJ Edwards has had a fine year with Chicago. I don't really regret not re-signing any of the linebackers because I don't know if they would have helped with how the defense was going. I think either way, no matter who was in that linebacking core, I don't think it would have helped. There's very few linebackers that would have gone into that scheme and done exceptional. On offense, you lost Isaac Samalo, but you know what? I liked seeing Cam Jurgens get some action. Cam Jurgens is supposed to be the successor to Jason Kelsey. I don't know if Jason Kelsey's going to retire or not. Um, but getting Jurgens just some action, get him some playing time. I love seeing that. I thought Jurgens was doing solid. I thought the offensive line overall played solid this year. But that's about it. I knew going into for some reason going into the year, people thought Miles Sanders was going to be a big loss. I never thought he was going to be a big loss. He during the second half of last season, probably around the Chicago Bears game last year, Miles just didn't look right. Didn't look like the same guy, and he was outplayed by Kenneth Gainwell ultimately in the playoffs. So I was okay with that, and you can see he didn't really have that great of a year with Carolina. Most of it probably had to do with the offense and the offensive line. I mean, you go from one of the best offensive lines of all time to one of the worst offensive lines in the entire league. Jalen Hurts, I don't think Hurts had a bad year. He was turning the ball over a lot. He was in the top like three in the top three or four in the league in turnovers. He also increased his touchdowns significantly. Everybody wants to talk about, oh, but they're all tush push touchdowns. He broke the record for rushing touchdowns. In order to get into those situations to tush push, you need to get into those situations. Um, so, I mean, Hurts was towards the top in franchise history in passing yards in a single season. Passing touchdowns, he set career highs in passing touchdowns. Rushing yards were not the same, and that's where scheme kind of affected that. Um, but rushing touchdowns, I mean, he tied the NFL record. Josh Allen also tied it this year, tied for most rushing touchdowns by a quarterback in a single season. Um, and I don't know. I thought Hurts played pretty well with what he was given. Um, yes, it could have been a lot better. I can't imagine what if you combine the efficiency of last year's Hurts with the overall numbers of this year, the frequency of scoring, how great Hurts would have been, and that goes to show how good Hurts can be. What is Hurts' potential? I mean, we saw that in the Super Bowl. I mean, that it was a great performance. I don't think you should go into next year having any doubt who your franchise quarterback is. Um, I loved watching Hurts. Some people don't like Hurts. I mean, I've had some people talk to me. I guess they don't watch games all that often, saying that Hurts is just a scrambler, that he just runs outside the pocket and runs for first downs. He's not good inside the pocket. Hurts this year and last year is much better inside the pocket than he is outside the pocket, statistically speaking. Not many, I don't know. I think that's the stereotype for running quarterbacks that they're just better outside the pocket than inside the quarterback, not with Jalen Hurts. Um, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown both had great years. Dallas Goedert probably could have been better. He did have some injuries, but Goddard definitely could have been better at times. I think his usage was dependent on the scheme, and I just don't think the scheme was benefiting him all that well. There was no real third weapon that was defined this year, and I think that was a big issue. I mean, you have AJ and Devontae, that's great, but who's going to be that bruiser up the middle? And up the middle, passing was a huge issue this year. DeAndre Swift had a great year. I don't expect him to be back next year. It's one of those things that you kind of committed to getting another running back each offseason with going into this year. I mean, you signed Rashad Penny, which something happened there. I don't know what. I'll get to that. And you trade for DeAndre Swift. So I assume this offseason, probably going to see a drafted running back, maybe traded for another running back, maybe signing another running back. But you're probably going to see a new backfield for the Eagles for the next couple years. And Rashad Penny, that was the worst thing this entire year. I mean, I don't know why he was even signed. He was inactive for almost every game this entire season. That's either on Howie or that's on the coaching staff for not using him. I don't know why. I think that it was on the coaching staff. I don't know why he just wasn't being used. I thought when he was used, he was okay. He got a couple carries and gained a couple yards. I didn't think he was terrible, but I think I don't understand why you don't use him. You're paying him. He's being paid to be inactive. So I don't know. I didn't understand that. That was probably the worst decision in this entire offseason. Offensive line again played very well. Lane Johnson played well. Jordan Mailata played well. A couple issues with false starts happens every season, but I think overall the offense played solid. I didn't think they played as dominant as they did last year. Last year they were just moving guys. They were moving groups of defenses. This year not as much. Um, a lot more illegal man downfields, and I think that had to do with just play calls, not understanding what the play call is, a lot of RPOs, stuff like that. Defensive side, not enough pressure. I mean, when Desai was the calling plays early in the year, they were starting to get pressure. Hassan Riddick was getting some sacks, and then Hassan Riddick disappeared. Josh Sweat was nowhere to be seen this year. I'm going into this offseason thinking, all right, Josh Sweat is young enough. Maybe we should trade Josh Sweat because he was causing a lot of penalties on false starts, encroachments, and he just wasn't doing anything. I liked watching Josh Sweat last year. I think he can be a very good edge rusher, but he just wasn't very good this year. Very disappointed. Brandon Graham was kind of lost up until the last couple weeks in the season. I've heard that next year is probably gonna be his last year. Fletcher Cox, I mean, I don't it's between Fletcher Cox and Jake Elliott. One of those two was the MVP this year for the Eagles. And because Fletcher Cox, I mean, this might not have statistically been his best year, but man, he was so important. Whenever everybody sucked, Fletcher never sucked. He was just awesome. And I really want him back on the team next year. I expect him to keep playing, but I really want him back on the team next year. Especially if you bring back Brandon Graham, you got to bring back Fletcher Cox. Jordan Davis, first half of the year played well, but there was an issue with just getting back in the shape. I don't. I heard there was issues with him staying in shape later in the season, and he was good at the beginning of the season. Which I mean, you could probably have seen that. I think he's really good. He just he also disappeared that second half of the year. A lot of it had to do with also Patricia coming in, rotating in the linemen way too much. It's one thing if you rotate the edge rushers and the whole D line, but you're doing it way too much, Patricia. And I thought Jordan Davis, I thought he was playing good, especially when Jalen Carter was out there. When Jalen Carter is on the field, wow, that guy was scary this whole year. I didn't see a single offensive lineman hold him up, and he was going sometimes one on one with Zach Martin. There was he was just he was blowing past everybody. He was getting double. He had to have been blocked by multiple people, and yet nobody else was doing anything. He's just bulldozing through guys. I would say he was the MVP this year, but that second half of the season, I don't know what happened. I honestly don't know where he went after the second Cowboys game. For the last 5 weeks of the year, I don't understand what happened. Milton Williams was getting him playing time. Ojimo was getting more playing time, the rookie. And I'm like, there's no reason this guy shouldn't be on the field at all times. That he's just too much of an X factor. He could win Defensive Rookie of the Year this year. I wouldn't be shocked, but I also wouldn't be shocked if someone else won it. I mean, he was consistently the best defensive rookie for like the majority of the year, but it kind of felt like Wentz's MVP season. Like he was the MVP front runner for 13, 14 weeks, but then fell off because Wentz got hurt. Carter scheme. Uh, Linebackers just non-existent this year. I kind of went over them already. Nicholas Moreau, I don't even know why he stayed on the team for as long as he did after that one game where he allowed over 100 yards. That was disgusting. Oh man, I don't understand. I didn't understand. I was cringing every time I saw him on the field. Nicholas Moreau was single-handedly losing us a game, despite James Bradbury and Darius Slay at that time locking everybody up for that one game. Everybody did well except Nicholas Moreau, and we ultimately lost because of that. Zach Cunningham missed a lot of tackles, wasn't really great, wasn't really good, wasn't terrible. He just was mediocre. Um, Darius Slay, at times he looked really good this year when he was healthy. He got hurt later in the year. James Bradbury was, I mean, some games, yeah, he wasn't really getting any targets. Does that mean you're good? I don't think so. That's the Richard Sherman effect, where if you're not, some people think if you're not targeted, that means you're good. Or that just means that there's other spots where that defense just sucks. And I think that was the case with James Bradbury. And I think that was the case with Richard Sherman, but that's a whole other thing. Eli Ricks, Keely Ringo, very good corners, very good young corners. I can't wait to see more of them coming up. Vontae Max got hurt, came back later in the year, played safety against the Bucks. He not good at playing safety. He lost us a game a couple years ago with a game-winning touchdown from the Titans playing safety. So he should never do that. I don't understand that. Sidney Brown, Sidney Brown looked really good. I like his potential. I like the pop that he gives to the defense. I can't wait to see more of him going forward. Reed Blankenship played awesome. I love watching Reed Blankenship. He was one of the top 3 or 4 guys on the team this year. And yes, Britton Covey on returner. I've never been a fan of Britton Covey. I don't think he's very good. Some people say he had a career year, and some people say he started off the year great. I feel like every time he returns a punt, I get worried and hold my breath that he doesn't fumble or he doesn't just make a dumb decision. Um, Punter, we had a recycling of punters over the last couple years. This year, not really a great year in term for Braden Mann. Jake Elliott had probably the best year of his career. it sucks that Brandon Aubrey was playing in the same division because Brandon Aubrey had historically one of the best years for a kicker ever, and it was in his first year kicking. Jake Elliott got second team All Pro, and by the Associated Press, Brandon Aubrey got first team All Pro. But yeah, Elliott, I mean, I I'm not afraid to say that he was likely the MVP for the Eagles this year. He was clutch in some of his games. He was scoring a lot of points. At one point, he was scoring over 50% of the Eagles' points. And then when that started to diminish from Jake Elliott, then the whole team kind of went downhill from there. But yeah, Jake Elliott had such an amazing year. Going forward, I can't wait to see who the coordinators are. I need to see who the coordinators are. Uh, Eagles have interviewed Ron Rivera so far. I've heard rumors of offensive coordinators, but nothing specific. So I don't know. Going into the next year, if the Eagles don't start off hot and they look like they did at the end of this year, I wouldn't be shocked if Sirianni was fired midway through the year. I mean, for that end of the year, I mean that was historically one of the worst ends of the year in NFL history for the start. Nick needs to learn change. He needs to learn from this whole thing. Uh, I think I think we got the right. I think there's the right pieces on offense and defense. I mean, going into next year, I know a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, the Eagles are losing a lot." Not really. Um, really, I would like to. I'd like to keep Fletcher Cox. I didn't want to keep Brandon Graham, but he said that it was only he's going to have a farewell tour. So my assumption is the Eagles are going to sign him to a 1 year deal. So Brandon Graham's probably going to be back. I want Fletcher Cox back. If Jason Kelce retires, think they got the game plan already set. Cam Jurgens is going to go play center, and then right guard is going to be Tyler Steen or maybe a rookie. Who knows? Tyler Steen, I thought in the times he came in, he looked solid. He looked pretty solid, so I'd be okay with that. I can't wait to see Cam Jurgens at center. Probably going to see a new running back there. Wide receivers, I'd like to see who the wide receiver three is going to be. You got to lock up Devonta Smith long term, likely this offseason. Tight end might want to address a backup tight end because Jack Stoll and Grant Calcaterra, I don't really think any of them are the long term future. And Goddard is older than Ertz was when we drafted Goddard. He's also older than Brent Selleck was when we drafted Zach Ertz. So yeah, I mean, offense probably gonna look a little different. Defense, I mean, you're gonna have edge rushers, Hassan Riddick. You got Nolan Smith still. Nolan Smith didn't really do anything this year. I don't really know. He didn't really get much playing time. Uh, Even if you get rid of Josh Sweat and James Bradbury, those are two guys I wouldn't be shocked if they're traded or cut. I think Josh Sweat is more likely to be traded. I think James Bradbury is more likely to be cut because of his age. So edge rushers next year, you could see Hassan Riddick, Nolan Smith, interior defensive line, nose tackle, Jordan Davis, uh, 3-4 defensive ends, Jalen Carter. You have Milton Williams, Marlon Tuipulotu. I still think defensive line looks great, and that's with Fletcher without re-signing Fletcher Cox. Linebackers, got to get new linebackers in there. Nakobe Dean's still going to be back next year. Still want to maybe get two linebackers in there. I want someone who can work great with linebackers and tackling in general, because that was the number one issue last year. Secondary, even if you get rid of Bradbury, you got Darius Slay, you got Keely Ringo, you got Eli Ricks, um, and Avonte Maddox. I wouldn't be shocked if Maddox is cut. Even then, I like what the corners look like. Safeties, Byard's still under contract. Reed Blankenship's still under contract. I trust Byard can do well going forward with the new defense. I want to keep Byard. I hope we just don't cut him because of what he did. There's potential there. Shaq Leonard is a free agent. Even though I would like to bring him back, I don't think it's going to happen. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I like what the team looks like next year. Oh, with Jalen Hurts leading on offense. Jake Elliott's still going to be back. Probably got to find a new punter. But, you know, this year was disappointing, really disappointing. I kind of, at the very worst, I would have liked to have gone to the divisional round and lose. But going into the playoffs and just losing first round feels like what the Cowboys do every year, and I didn't like that. Um, I did like the Packers winning though. You know, just gotta do better next year. That's all. I trust with the guys we have right now on the actual team on the roster that this team can still compete for a Super Bowl. Um, but when it comes to coaching, that's where I have an issue. I don't really know what the future holds because Sirianni's not really a scheming guy. He's more of a motivational guy. And I don't know what the offense is going to look like next year scheming. I don't know what the defense is going to look like next year scheming. Ideally, I'd like to find someone. I didn't like Jonathan. All right. So backing up, I didn't like Jonathan Gannon. I still think Jonathan Gannon is not really a good defensive mind. He creates a lot of pressure, thus giving the secondary the time to lock down their receivers that the offense would be throwing to. That's not really good coaching for a secondary. Um, but Gannon was better than Patricia and Desai. I mean, even if Gannon stayed, hypothetically speaking, I still think we would have had issues with the defense. Um, just not as bad. Offense, I mean, I said it going into the year, Steichen might be a pretty big loss. I didn't think it would be that big of a loss. Uh, Going into my predictions next year, it's going to be tough because I have to think more about scheming too for teams. So, you know, going into next year, I really hope we get some veteran coaches in there that know experience offensively. I want a veteran guy. I want a veteran guy who has experience, but is not good of a head coach to where we'd lose him next year. That's the Eagles season. Gotta just get better next year. I believe that the right guys are on this team to go and win a Super Bowl. I love Hurts's mindset. Um, there's some rumors that Hurts has been unapproachable. Um, that's a rumor. I've looked into that rumor. I know where the source is. That source is known for spreading false information, so don't believe everything you see on the internet. Going into next year, I just want the Eagles to try and win the division, go deep into the playoffs. All right, go Eagles.